So, holy moly. My last video on the subject did so well, and EA's performance at E3 this year was about as bad as anyone could expect that I had to do a follow-up.
Who the f***? Get off the stage!
Full disclaimer, Battlefield 5 has me excited. They actually did release a much better trailer the second time around. DICE didn't try the one long take mistake again, and this time they delivered a much more traditional trailer that actually made the game look very exciting. The Battlefield 5 Alpha was also released to certain people, and outside of some balancing issues, the game seems like a promising step up from Battlefield 1 and more of a return to Battlefield 4 and 3's style of Battlefield design. The gameplay also showed exactly what I was saying in my previous video. The trailer misrepresented the game because in action, Battlefield 5's Alpha looks much more like a World War II shooter, even if it does have female soldiers. And oh, believe me, there were a lot of people triggered that I don't give a shit about female soldiers in this game. Look at this. It's a fucking video game, dude. Calm down. Now, childish comments aside, there were people who were able to actually give very constructive criticism about the misrepresentation of World War II in a respectful manner, and I do want to thank you guys who were able to explain it to me in a better manner. I can now see why some people have issues with it, even though I personally don't really care because I'm more concerned about the gameplay, because that was my biggest issue with Battlefield 1. At the end of this video, we will be talking about the misrepresentation of World War II and what I've gathered from the actual feedback of people who do have genuine issues, and the kind of problem with the way that there's a lot of generalization and misrepresentation of the criticism directed at it. I do think now that there is legitimacy to the issues that people are bringing up, and I want to thank you guys for being able to explain it to me in a very constructive way. Now, before we begin, I need to remind you guys that this is a controversial subject. There is a lot of legitimate criticism of this game that's sadly buried by immaturity and legitimate sexism. Do not devalue the issues with the way that people are voicing themselves online, in the same way that I'm not going to devalue your opinion if you do have a genuine and mature issue with the way that the game is representing World War II. Calling those who refuse to harass developers and get angry social justice warriors will not solve your problems. You catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. If you don't like the way that this game portrays World War II, instead of leaving gross and angry comments like this, take the time to write out why you dislike it, because those are the comments and complaints that DICE and EA read, not blind, unfiltered rage. Be the bigger man. Be respectful. Be insightful. Let's begin. EA and DICE, I do this not because I want to see the brand go down in flames. I do this because I think the marketing for Battlefield 5 has been consistently poor, despite the quality of the game, which I think looks incredibly high. The reason I do this is because I want to give EA and DICE a way to correct their presentation from just a ground level, what I as a spectator am seeing when I see advertising for Battlefield 5. And I want more people to give this game the chance I believe it deserves, but I don't think they're gonna give it a chance because EA and DICE just keep screwing up the marketing. This isn't out of hate, it's out of frustration. It's been a little while now since the terribly presented reveal of the game. Trevor Noah was distracting, concept art and boring menu screens were shown before they even gave us a trailer, which was confusing. The stage is bland, sterile, and lifeless with no energy or enthusiasm, which is sad because Black Ops 4, a game I find to look incredibly bland and uninspired, has people excited. EA and DICE had time to process the feedback that they got from the Battlefield 5 reveal. Did they get enough time to act on the feedback before E3? Did the legitimate feedback about their poor presentation get buried by a flood of immature man-babies? Who knows? but they clearly did not learn their lesson with E3. I think it's safe to say that EA's E3 presentation was the worst E3 presentation of this year and one of the worst ones in recent years. What's sad is it wasn't even cringy, which is a redeeming factor due to the comedic value of cringy conferences. EA's was just boring. So boring. Again, they decided to go with that weird, clean, minimalist approach that didn't do the Battlefield 5 reveal any favors. Only now it was spread across all their games, not just Battlefield. How did they excite people for Anthem? They put it near the end of the show after boring everyone to tears with FIFA, Madden, and a fucking mobile app? It's E3. Why are you letting this tiny mobile app swallow up your whole show? A majority of mobile gamers probably are not tuning into E3. They're literally advertising to the wrong audience. It would have been a lot easier of a pill to swallow if this mobile app was launching alongside a real Command & Conquer game, and that the mobile app was being co-developed alongside it. Now, the conference wasn't a complete disaster because it did kick off well enough, but it was still very flawed and kind of a boring presentation for Battlefield 5. They clinically and kind of boringly just talked about changes for Battlefield 5 as if this was a patch for Battlefield 1 or something. I normally don't like when developers do these awful scripted multiplayer match things because of how fake it looks. Players don't play like this. But here, I think it would have actually worked much better than this weird slideshow presentation of gameplay changes. Imagine if they scripted out a multiplayer match, and the player soldier visually experiencing the various gameplay changes around him, seeing a tank rolling around and destroying buildings in a realistic way, so he sprints into a nearby house and has to clear it of a Nazi soldier before reviving a teammate to show off the new revive system. Then together, he and his teammate run outside and spot a vacant vehicle with an air gun attached on it. The teammate hops into the vehicle while the player character mans the airgun, and together they begin outrunning some planes and taking them down, and so on and so on and so on. And all throughout this gameplay presentation, have one of the developers talking over the gameplay every once in a while, and explaining what it is we're looking at and why this gameplay system that they introduced matters. Have it be interactive, hype up the crowd, make jokes, laugh, scream, get excited, something. We're competitive gamers. We want you to hype us up, not present your game like it's a middle school English project. I'm not sure if it's like a pride and ego thing, wanting to come off as more professional than the other studios, but it's not working. After the Battlefront 2 insanity, EA needed to play it safe with their game reveals, and I think this weird minimalism thing and heavy focus on developers and just talking is some way of trying to humanize the people who are working on the games. Some sort of, look, we aren't just soulless robots who want to hook you on gambling, we're real people. But this was an overcorrection. Now your games just look boring and even ashamed to be revealed. There's no excitement. You look embarrassed to be on stage. Thankfully, it isn't all for nothing. Lars is such a charismatic dude, seriously. If anyone were to be the face of a game, I'd want it to be him. His soft voice, warm smile, and just handsome face is so damn fun to look at. I've seen people who are working on the game, and I can see that there is a very human and genuine group of developers. I wish I could say more about the E3 presentation, but I really can't. It was just boring. It went from a complete disaster to simply boring and uninspired. And I mean, I guess objectively that is an improvement in quality, but it's not what Battlefield 5 needs. They're doing a better job of trying to make it look like a World War II game. I appreciated that there was a lot of familiar silhouettes, like having the player holding an MP40 in some of the gameplay sequences. But overall, there's just nothing here. If I was not already a Battlefield fan, I wouldn't care about this game. It looks boring. But now I want to talk a little bit about the representation of the Second World War in Battlefield 5. So here's the annoying thing on my end, alright? I want to talk a little bit about how I personally feel. Battlefield 1, I really like as a game. I really do like it. But I can also acknowledge it was very, very destructive to Battlefield's gameplay systems. It made a lot of puzzlingly poor gameplay decisions that ultimately broke down combat. There was a lot of regression in a lot of areas for that game. So for me, with Battlefield 5, I am way more concerned with what they're gonna do with the gameplay, because that's why I play Battlefield. I don't care about if there are female soldiers running around. I'm way more worried about if it's actually going to be better designed than Battlefield 1. That's why I don't care as much about the female soldiers. And then also, I generally don't really care about this stuff. World War II was actually my favorite topic in American history outside of the American Revolution. So I do understand from a historical standpoint, but I also understand that video games, their primary goal is to make money. And there are a lot of female gamers out there, and giving them the option to switch their avatars over to a female avatar, I can see why that would immerse people. Also, in my opinion, I think when you put everybody in super heavy trench coats and give everyone helmets and stuff, at the end of the day, you can't even tell anybody apart. They all look like one guy in a trench coat. So I don't think that it breaks the silhouette of the Second World War as much as, say, Call of Duty World War II, where you had everybody running around in rainbow trench coats, or, in Battlefield 5's case, having people running around like Diesel Punk Mad Max characters with prosthetic limbs. That's going a little bit too far. I understand that representation is important, contrary to popular belief. I do think that you can take it a little bit too far to the point where it feels condescending. Instead of creating these fictional instances where, look, a woman is fighting where they primarily were very discriminated against, instead show the aspects of World War II where women did genuinely serve and the shit that they had to go through because of how odd it was at that time because of inequality. I can't actually find the exact comment, but somebody brought up a very good point where he was saying that in traditional American media, Thanksgiving, the colonists, they were always portrayed as being very friendly with the Native Americans, that Thanksgiving was just a happy time where everyone got along and the natives happily showed colonists from England how to plant crops, when in reality it was more like a massacre. It was an invading force that came and wiped this indigenous people off of their land. And people speak up about that. Why are you being disingenuous? History wasn't like that. It was horrifying. But when it comes to World War II, it's, oh, no, we gotta have proper representation. We can't really show the nasty side of it. So it's kind of like, it's very hypocritical, this kind of message of equality, where it's like, look, are we going to present history as accurately, but also as cruelly as it really was? Or are we going to just start pretending that everything was a fantasy and everyone always got along? This is the genuine criticism that I hear of misrepresenting actual history. And it's really sad that these genuine pieces of criticism are being buried by actual sexism and people just making nasty, nasty remarks. Some of you have actual criticisms about this game that are not rooted in some sexism. It's about wanting to portray the brutality and the sad reality of human history accurately. Don't let yourself be buried by just nasty sexism and women belong in the kitchen jokes. It's ultimately a touchy subject. I still don't care about the female soldiers in Battlefield 5, and not because I'm a SJW or whatever. I just don't care as much. I'm way more concerned about if they're gonna screw up the gameplay again with this game. But thanks to the responsible way that a lot of you did leave your comments about the inequality thing, I can see that it doesn't really come from a place of sexism, it comes from a place of being brutally honest. Human history is a pretty gross thing if you look back at it. There's a very long history of people treating each other like shit. And sometimes when diving into human history, tackling some of those issues is required. You know, you can't gloss over them. You can't pretend that everything was always fine, everything was great, and everyone got along. No. In order to look back, we also sometimes need to face how far we've come since then. And I think that that's okay. That's why it would actually be a little bit more interesting if, instead of DICE creating these fictional settings for women, they showed actual, real, historical women and some of the shit that they did have to go through in the Second World War, if they did want to include women in their World War II shooter. As I said, though, I don't personally care, that's just me being devil's advocate, but I do understand the other side now, and I do think there is some legitimate argument about if we should be misrepresenting World War II to a new generation of gamers. And so ultimately, this is where we end the video. I know it's not as passionate and as fiery as the original Battlefield 5 reveal video, but it's simply because there isn't much to talk about here. This reveal was just simply uninteresting, which I guess is a step up from being a complete dumpster fire. Down below, I want you guys to comment your thoughts, alright? Because I like hearing what the gamers are thinking. I like gathering information and kind of seeing what the general consensus is for how people feel about certain controversial subjects. Remember, please be responsible and respectful in the comments section. I'm not going to attack you if you don't attack me. I just want to hear your side of the argument. I want to be in your shoes and kind of see what you're seeing. So I'll leave you guys to it. And guys, I'll see you on the next video.